Welcome to the second edition of Whose Brand Is It Anyway? I'm Ankur from Fireside, your host for the session today. Whose Brand Is It Anyway is an initiative from our side where we do intend to create a platform for having candid conversations with successful entrepreneurs in trying to understand and decode what is the success mantra for creating and building the new age consumer brands. In the last 5 years, India has seen a gigantic transformation from a consumption perspective. And while there are patterns and indications that this is continue to grow in the next 10 years, what we want to decode and understand is the nuances and aspects of building brands and building businesses. We at Fireside have worked very closely with a lot of D2C entrepreneurs, and these sessions, conceptualized by the Fireside Ignite team and also co-hosted by Your Stories brand of New India, wants to create a platform where budding entrepreneurs can learn, derive from the perspectives of successful entrepreneurs, and in their own journeys imbibe those learnings. At the session today, what we intend to talk about is a theme which the entire ecosystem eats, breathes, and sleeps, and that's called scaling up. While generally scaling up is understood as an destination and measured in the numerical terms, be it in terms of revenue, uh, consumers, repeats, and we've all heard those terms. What is important to understand is to take a step back and say, what really is the journey which entrepreneurs traverse through in their growth ambition to get to that scale? How do they structure, set up, and scale up the business models? What we intend to do in this session is get a first-hand perspective from two successful entrepreneurs. And on that note, let me introduce my co-panelists. Ayushi Gudwani, founder of Fable Street, now named as FS Life, the house of brands for the new age Indian woman, and Vishal Gupta, co-founder at Gynoveda, which is building the menstrual health platform using Ayurveda as a theme. Welcome, Ayushi, and welcome, Vishal. And I
Thank
look
you,
forward
Ankur.
to having
Thank you so much for having us.
right, and I look forward to having a very fruitful conversation with both of you. Let's
Awesome.
let's start
Looking forward.
likewise. So let's start with understanding and decoding what business model is and what are the wireframes one has to keep in mind while conceptualizing business models. What I will do is I'll start with the theoretical part of wireframes of how one should wire this in terms of their business when they set it up and scale up. And then I'll hand it over to Vishal and Ayushi to get their perspectives. Now, the way we look at business models is truly there are ways and means of creating value for the business over the long term. While you deliver meaningful value for your consumers, how do you then traverse back that value through monetization strategies into business for creating long-term sustainable value? And that is the engine which runs your growth for the business. A very common analogy which I use to compare your business models, your growth journeys, is something like mapping it to a race car engine. What it really, and the way I look at it, right, is it's an amalgamation of a fuel, the engine, the kickstart, the lubricant, and the turbo, and all have to work in sync because ultimately the goal is to get to that finish line, win that race. And while there are constraints in this journey which are unpredictable, you need to live with. In fact, I think tremendous respect for entrepreneurs because as one starts the journey, the parallel is you are literally the F1 driver without any sponsorship and you're living on the edge. You need to win the race and you don't know what comes your way, right? So if I have to take a step back and say for D2C, what's the canvas for business models? And I think the building blocks are very clear. One, because it's a consumer business when you're building, you need to understand the TG, create touch points both in terms of discovery and transactions. And given fundamentally the businesses have got created both on native platforms as well as marketplaces, the marketing channels as well as sales channels become important for the as a starting point and a building block. The second is to create a brand, keeping the customer in the center, keeping it transparent, driving the purpose and the value of the brand which resonates with your TG. I think the third important lever which comes into play is creating a platform which is more of a scalable supply chain. It has to be responsive, it has to be agile to the ecosystem. The fourth play, which is a term which typically will connect all these elements, will be around the whole data play. One has to be realistic, one has to respond to real time issues in the ecosystem to tap into those opportunities, and hence how to create that data layer which gives you access to analyze these situations better and almost react to it on a real time basis. I think the fifth element which does become important is your innovation competency, the entire NPD engine, to respond to those nuances, to respond to those opportunities. And the operational layer to all of these elements, the way I see it, be it your people, be it your process, be it your technology, has to be looked at it as you start your journey from a fundamental perspective. Right? Once you understood your PG, once you understood and created that value proposition which is differentiated, once you identified what is the digital ethos of the business, it is about a managing priorities. It is about integrating these elements together. And at each stage, I understand that these elements will play out very differently, right? And I think on that note, let me take a pause and try and understand from Ayushi and Vishal how in their journey they looked at the business model. So Ayushi, as you started FS Life or Fable Street earlier, right? You had a goal in mind. How did you really traverse through these elements we spoke about and really get to building a business which takes you to that goal? Would love to understand your viewpoints and
Yeah. Thank you, Ankur. If I actually reflect back to the time when I was starting off, right, I think today the way we articulate as a reflection, we can actually bring in some lens on the, the storytelling and the conversation, and also synthesize our answers in that. But, back then when you have to start, you're equally confused, and anyone is. And despite me coming from McKinsey, understanding all the PPTs and the jargons, right, I eventually went back, going back to the whiteboard saying, you have to answer three questions for yourself. Question number one is, what is the ticket to win in the market that you want to work with? In our case, it was apparel. We quickly understood that supply chain win is the most important aspect to win. And India is the house of supply chain, and therefore you'll have to create that win as an answer around it. We have to build a business with low inventory, etc. Right? But the question is, what is the ticket to win in the segment? It shouldn't be a niche question of your answer. It should be saying market care, because as you think about building a scalable business model, you don't have to think even from day one saying कि मैं ये कर रहा हूँ तो मुझको उसका size or scale देखना है, right? That's number one. Second is keeping that lens of ticket to win in mind. What are you going to build, and what is going to be the USP of what you are building? And that is going to be understanding of the market, and then also understanding of the consumer. And I did go through a proper process of doing a survey amongst 200, 300 consumers to figure out and narrow down that when it comes to apparel and Western wear, sizing is the most important answer. And that's how we narrowed it down to say that our core USP that we still need to build for is this. The third answer or the thought process that you need to build in is that whatever are the building blocks and the answers that you need to think about, and you just articulated them, have to be scalable in nature. You can't build a business in the near term on hustle and then expect that you will fully pivot and change it 5 years down the line. At least that was the process, because I'd also seen a lot of businesses scale to know that you have to build for scale from day one. You can't say that let me try this MVP bana do uske baad dekhenge kaise scale kare. And specifically in the D2C space, right, as even as investors, you guys, you're thoroughly looking at what's the profitable view on the model, what's the scalable answer. You don't invest assuming that they'll figure out the journey to scale. So that's those are the three questions that are important to answer. And that those are the elements that I answered. Two other things which in the hindsight helped me work through the business. I think number one is that you do need to build your business for agility. And we have seen it during COVID. We have seen it like in my journey of running the business for last 6 years now. We've seen demonetization, we have seen GST regime, we have then seen COVID, 3 waves of COVID, right? I mean, anything and everything that could test an entrepreneur has tested us. Agility was a word that we never thought of using, but end of the day, all of us were agile because we were hustlers, we were as a team based, right? So important to think through on how you build for agility. And the simple answer to this is getting the team which is driven and open to change. There is no other answer to agility saying कि ये process ऐसे कर देंगे. कोई process agile नहीं होता है. So you have to build a team which is open to change, and then you keep on modifying your answer. And finally, fifth point that I would say, as you think about really building the business across the journey, is reflect inwards as an entrepreneur and a founder. Be very well aware on what your strengths are and what are the areas that you need support on. And then focus your time on your strength areas where you can enter into the business, work through it. And the areas which you are not strong on, supplement for it from day one. Don't try to think that, when you come there, you come there. And I meet a lot of founders and see, right, accounting pe focus nahi kiya, yeah, a lot of things which you're not strong around. You can't say that, this part of the business you will end up fixing later, you around this. So supplement for it from day one. In my case, I started as a single founder. So I actually ended up doing, and I may have taken time, but I ended up doing all aspects of business on my own, going deep into the execution to the nth level. It was very hard. It actually kind of, I would say, slowed us down in the first 1.5 years because I was trying to do everything. But today, sitting 6 years down the line in the hindsight, no one can fool me around. I know every aspect of my business in and out, and also on where are the loopholes in this. I have completely stepped back, got in a team, they are running and scaling it, but I know what are the breaking points and I can step back and drive that. So I would say this is my framework about thinking about building a scalable model.
Great. No, thanks, Ayushi, for that perspective. Vishal, I think one key element to understand from you would be how did you really traverse through this journey of business model as you stage gated through the growth, right? What are the actions you took? How did you prioritize? Because a founder is, and as rightly pointed out by Ayushi, it is really managing and balancing that hustle and the methodical approach of building the business, right? So how did you look at it? What were the learnings?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I would second what Ayushi just mentioned. I think the key element I found to be my best friend is actually my inner voice. Back then, when the transition took place from doing a job to transitioning into doing something of my own, I think inner voice played a dominant role. And in addition to that, I think when we're thinking about the business model, especially at the stage of startup, when you're just starting up, I'm not sure whether you're really thinking of a business model. What you're really thinking is, what problem am I solving? And that discovery happens in two ways. One is either you face the same problem and something has worked for you and it's solved the problem. Or you see people around you as a social intelligence and say, hey, I can solve that problem. I somewhere synthesize my own experiences over the last 10 years, 5 years, and say maybe there is a better solution, a 10x better solution that exists for the problem either I'm facing or someone else in my circle is facing, and I can solve it far better than anyone else that exists. Yeah, I feel that's the start of any business. And a lot of that happens through inner reflection. And a lot of that is actually against the validation that you're looking from the society. I feel that's the start, and that's not even the business model. I think that's the general philosophy of really starting up that I went through. And I would just like to add two more points there. Is don't build business model to raise money. Actually build business model to solve problems, and the money will follow. And honestly, if I have to do this journey for either raising money or making money, I wouldn't last long. But if the passion is to build value, and then probably the wealth follows or the money follows, I think it's going to be a lot easier. Yeah. So I think I'm here personally to enjoy the journey, and honestly, I don't have a destination. So when I'm asked what's your goal? What's your number? While I may give one, but deep down, I know I'm enjoying the journey and I don't have a destination. So coming directly to the business model, Ankur, I think if I have to simplify, I have to look, complex things, I try in a way, if I can simplify the framework. And when I look at the business model, there are four things that matter. Number one is what kind of engagement is taking place. Is it one to many or many to many? For example, a one to many is Gynoveda or a D2C brand, right? I'm selling as a brand to many, 200,000 customers across India, but a single entity. Or there could be a doctor clinic, which Dr. Aarti Patil, my co-founder, was doing, 3 years back. And it was again one to many, but she was seeing like 10 patients in a day. Now, here comes the question of scalability. That same Dr. Aarti is today solved in the last 2 years problem for 200,000 people. And in her 10 years career, she could not cover 5,000 people. I think that's what a business model change can really do to the same person. That's where one to many played out, where one business model was not scalable, the other business model was scalable. Same problem, same product, same solution, just stacked differently. Yeah. Another vector is many to many, an Uber, Amazon, marketplaces, or a messaging tool, is an example of many to many. That also is a business model. Now, the question on the second vector or the second leg is in true sense, what is the price model? Is it a freemium? Is it free? Is it paid? I think that's the second leg of the stool. The first leg is one to many or many to many. The second leg is really, is it free? Is it paid? Or is it freemium? A freemium could be like a Zoho, or a freemium could be any of the SaaS tools. A free could be a messaging tool. A free could be a Facebook, which makes money on advertisement. A paid could be Gynoveda or FS Life of Ayushi, where we are directly asking people to really pay. And there is no freemium involved here. So that's the second leg. And the third leg is frequency. I mean, how frequent are you buying, purchasing, repeating, or using that particular product? Yeah. So one of the product could be, and both are great, right? I mean, I'll give an example of one of Fireside's great brand, that has been built over time is both, I may buy this headphone and I may not buy this headphone every month, but it's still a great brand. It's a great story that we have built. On the other side, you have medicine, which Gynoveda is selling, and that needs to be consumed every month. Both are great business model. I mean, there is no one versus the other. End of the day, it's the unit economics that matters. In case if you're selling that particular product at a price where you can recover your acquisition cost in the first purchase, then it's a great business. And you can sell to many, then it's a greater business, right? So I feel that's the third leg. On business model, and when we're talking about scalability, the fourth model is basically the time aspect. That means you've got one to many to many right. You've got your payment model right. You've got your frequency model right. Now, how far will it take? How long will it take to really become a market leader? Again, picking up an example of, say, like, Dr. Aarti Patil's clinic versus a Gynoveda, 10 years, you still can't become a market leader with a single clinic. Whereas you want to become a market leader in, say, women health space, you need to change your business model from one to many without really a single person dependency. And can that product be distributed to many? Yeah. And I think in the end, from a scalability standpoint, the last big question, which is not part of the business model per se, but really scalability question, is how big is the problem? I mean, how many people are really facing that? And I feel when I have to really check how big is the problem, there is a great tip out there, is just simply go to Google Ads Manager and fire up, the keyword planner and think of the problem that you want to solve and type in those keywords. It will throw some 5,000 keywords. Check out the volume. You'll understand how big is the problem.
Great. No, I think great perspectives from both you and Ayushi. I think let me use that as a segue to try and understand the dynamic aspect to it, right? As you build your business so far and as you look at the road ahead, right? The whole external and internal factors. And Ayushi, I think it's a great example how FS life really pivoted, right? Multiple times. You did allude to that point, but want to understand there will be some elements in your business, come what may, you will always retain, right? You don't want to let go of those elements. So, come what may, the internal factors are or the external factors are. If you could share some experience around as you thought of pivoting your business, right, which essentially really meant rewiring the entire and going back to the whiteboard, relooking at the business. What are some of those elements which you had built or had started to build, and you said these are something I can't let go of? I mean, just wanted to understand from that. I think Vishal, to you, my question will be more around saying, what are you okay to let go of? As you've progressed through the journey, I would want to understand both the viewpoints.
So I think in our case, it's also, I mean, the pivot as the world sees is actually not a real pivot. It's an interesting journey. The way we had to look inward was that when COVID happened, we were primarily a workwear brand. And we had to step back and look at sustaining the business. And we transitioned from pure play workwear to Western wear. And we did it very quickly. And, as an entrepreneur, as even Vishal said, right? हर चीज को हम बिजनेस मॉडल या लॉजिक से नहीं फ्लो करते वी जस्ट से कि व्हाट इज द नेक्स्ट बिग थिंग दैट वी कैन रन फॉर एंड वी रन फॉर इट दैट्स योर डेली हसल एंड द लाइफ अराउंड इट राइट as we progressed to 5-6 months into COVID, what it did help us go back to the whiteboard was reflect back that what are the skill sets that we have built. And as an organization, we realized that we have built very strong supply chain, which is extremely agile. We can work with minimal inventory. We had genuinely built just-in-time tech around this. We have also built strong consumer intelligence and the data insights orientation towards it. And we already know how to build brands, etc., around it because that's what we had built around the time, right? So if you reflect back, then what we've realized is that all the fundamental business building blocks are very strong and already built. The reason we could reorient our organization was that we had this and they all played together for the first time very well and came together beautifully. And then that's the question that you asked, right? Why don't you do more? Because this is successful ingredient to build multiple brands. It doesn't matter. And that's how they transitioned for us to from a single brand to a house of brands happen. So in a nutshell, end of the day, the fundamental principles of the doing the business don't change. The core building blocks for us remain the same. Instead of that, now supporting one brand, they are supporting a multiple set of brands is how we thought about it. And the journey that we are almost a year into the journey, it's actually transitioning and turning out to be very well. And all the hypotheses and the thought process that we put in place is actually turning and driving that journey very, very strongly. The only difference, therefore, is in the reflection is that, when you're in the process of running the business, you don't know what you're building. When you're forced to step back and reflect, you can actually articulate those building blocks more cleanly and then use them to transition. As you go back to your wireframe discussion, use them to transition. So today we are much more methodical and thoughtful about what those blocks are, and we can't lose them at all.
Got it. So the way I also read it is one, it's initially a lot about hustle and getting the fundamentals right, and then building on top of it in a more methodical way as you scale up.
Yes.
Right. Go to you, Vishal.
Yeah, I think the question is what can I let go? And over time, let go is a difficult one.
Thank God you didn't ask me this question.
Sorry for putting you in the spot. No, I think.
No, I would love to answer that, and that's a very pertinent question, Ankur. And it made me think, as to what have I really let go in the last 2.5 years. And there are two things that I will talk about. Number one is control. When I started, I wanted to control everything. I was and my two other founders along with me were the center of startup universe, our startup universe, right? I mean, we felt that, startup and us is one. There is no difference between the two. We are the startup, right? And everything circles around us. As we grew, we realized that we don't have the bandwidth to have that thinking, right? I mean, as we can be our own enemies if we control the startup like as if it's our baby. While I would want to control it like my baby, but that can be very, very detrimental to the business as far as scale is concerned. So I think control, I would let go over a period of time. And while I'm letting go, because I've been an operator controlling, I would build system and process to be able to review it periodically so that it doesn't lose orbit and it doesn't really, tailspin into something difficult to require. That's one. The second one is, I think, which I would let go, and I've let go over a period of time, is zeal for perfection. Like I wanted everything to be 100%. That means we started from zero, hustle, hustle, hustle. It's gone 70%, and I'm still hustling and saying it can become 100%. Right? I think we have to let go. There are so many areas, so many nut bolts that need to be watched, so many indicators to be really watched. So far as you've got 70%, let go the control. Team may not be able to do as perfect as you would be able to do it, but that's fine. I think build tolerance, let go, control, and perfection.
Great. Oh, that's very interesting perspective. So fine balance of the control and letting go of so the element of perfection. I mean, that's quite interesting, right? Because I think on that note, let me also throw some light around how we as investors look at revisiting the journey. We looking at what we believe entrepreneurs should consider. What's our advice to them? So I think, and if I just take a step back and say, what's our role in this journey, right? Our role in this journey is to be the sounding board, to ask the right questions and guide the entrepreneurs in the journey to say, while you are facing the whole dynamic environment, how do you really look at revisiting the business models or the various elements? And some may not be even applicable for you, but with a single goal in mind to say that you've set yourself on a mission to achieve a certain goal, right? I think the way to look at it and a different perspective is use every opportunity or the dynamicity as an opportunity to create business multifold or an opportunity to grow. What it really translates into is, given the ethos is digital, ethos is innovation, and leveraging that to tap into that opportunity sooner than later, right? And if I have to break this, there are two elements to it. One is the whole consumer value proposition, and that will take care of your target segments, your value proposition, your revenue model, etc. But at an operating level, and that's where the question of profitability, competitive advantage, the true value creation comes into play. I think there are three questions to be answered, right? As you think of revisiting the model, where in the value chain do you play? Do you start considering yourself for a backward or a forward integration? And at what time do you consider that, right? Or do you pivot yourself to say, I want to play as XYZ, because in the value chain, there is a lot of value which can be unlocked. The second important perspective which comes into play is the whole cost model, because that's going to give you the returns. How do you rewire your cost models as you go from a 0 crore to a 5, 50, etc.? That journey. And I think that plays out. And if there is a thought to it, the changes to your business model, while the fundamentals continue to remain intact, I think as both of you touched upon, that becomes interesting. And the third, and both of you did allude to, is the whole drawing from your control and the whole capability or skills, the capability built up, which has to be scalable, right? So any change which you're doing should not jeopardize that core capability you've built in the business. And if I have to zoom in the journey from 0 to 5 to 50, it's a very fine balance between time and capital. So Vishal, you did allude to time aspect. I think from an investor standpoint, also important to give that perspective to the founders to say, how does this change impact your business in the midterm and the long term, right? And that's a fine balance between entrepreneurs' bandwidth, entrepreneurs' resources, the organization's resources will rally then behind this prioritized initiative. So, and for us, I think, and then we've seen this, right, both for FS Live as well as for Gynoveda in the last 2-3 years, how every decision has been thought through, both from a time perspective, both from a long-term vision and a capital standpoint, right? In fact, we've got some great examples across the portfolio where each of these dynamic question to the environment has been used as an opportunity. Be it getting into tier 2 plus, be it looking at new product offerings because there is demand from the consumer. The consumer feedback loop is literally live, feeding into your business. So I think there are a lot of these elements which give you indications. As an investor, for us, it becomes important to have that sounding board, to ask the right questions, and then define saying, does it merit a change first? And then to the question which both of you answered around saying, what do I retain and what do I let go? No, I think so far what we've touched upon is how these various elements of the business, as you think through starting off and then scaling up, how do you integrate these elements? Keep in mind the dynamic environment you operate in, and how do you prioritize all these elements, right? I think, as they say, defining all of this is very easy, but really the proof of the pudding lies in execution, right? I think would love to understand from both of you as you started your journey and started building it on ground, right? Bottoms up. What were some of those learnings and some suggestions you would have for the budding entrepreneurs to say, while there is a dogged determination in every entrepreneur to get to that journey, right? How do you bring all of this thought process into execution? Because on a day-to-day basis, you'll be prioritizing, you'll be living through the hustle, right? Just a few examples and learnings will be very helpful for our budding entrepreneurs to take cues from and prepare for the best or the worst.
Ayushi?
Okay. I mean, I have two reflections from my journey, not complex. The end of the day, it is just such a hard way to say when do you really start and what is the execution. The most cliched way of saying it, but it is the reality is kar dalo. There is no other answer to it. I mean, I go back in the hindsight, I took 3 months to launch the business. I mean, 3 months from photo shoot to the launch of the business when the business was ready to launch. Because as Vishal mentioned, I was striving for perfection. Ye image theek nahi hai, isko change kar do, ye banner font theek nahi hai, and all of that. To realize that, that was lost opportunity, lost time season. Sometimes we get in our own minds around it. I think if someone has to take away something, that doing something which is even 30%, 40% right and doing it, as opposed to keep on thinking it and building it up, right? Just take the former answer. Just do it is literally a crucial way for me to learn around this. And now that I have gone through the journey over 6.5 years, right? The simple, fastest way that it runs in my mind today is if someone comes up with an idea, right? I actually tell myself, what's in it to lose? Nahi hai na kuch. Move ahead and do it. I don't say ki let me now intellectualize for 3 months, come back with this data, this thing, because end of the day, despite all of the data inputs, checking with multiple things and around it, right? Um, you still have to jump from saying ki karu ki na karu, and that jump is very hard. So that pushing everyone to make that jump, and even for me as an entrepreneur, pushing myself to just make it happen, is actually the most important jump that I would encourage all of us to take. I have actually wired my brain today saying that if you don't do it, then there is no other answer. But I also process information that, are you losing a lot of money? So which should also not be saying ki execution kar dalo to know ki kuch paisa uda diya, but have those 2 3 very simple principles in your head that what's in it to lose. Are you losing money? Are you losing consumer experience? Are you losing something big? Then yes, go more thoughtful about it. Otherwise, please jump and do the execution. I think that's one critical learning and something that I really take away with me. The second thing around the journey of building and execution is, it's just a learning for me, is that you really don't know until you do it, and your answer can completely change until you do it. And this also comes from a learning of being an ex-consultant, right? The business models and everything that I would have made on Excel and everything is great, market study kar liya, ye kar liya, wo kar liya, right? But जब खुद करते हो तो तुम्हें पता लगता है, oh God, this is not even feasible. There are so many times that 80-20 in the execution doesn't work. The last 20% of the execution journey tells you that, that entire answer was so impractical and that's not even feasible. So again, that brings back to the same point, that go back and do it, or yourself, and the fact that you have to start doing it on your own. So as an entrepreneur, trying to say कि ये उसको दे दिया और पूरा outsource कर दिया और वो कर लेगा is, in the early days, is not a good idea. In the latter days, like once you reach a particular momentum around this, then it is still a good idea. But early days, get to it and get to do it, because if you've done it yourself, you'll know the challenge. You'll be a great person to guide your team. Eventually, in the execution, you'll be able to identify कि वो भी क्यों भाग रहा है execution से. So you'll be able to do all of that. Plus, you will also realize that a lot of the answers that you intuitively think don't end up happening. And this happens at the micro level, it doesn't happen at a macro level. So even for us, answers haven't changed. We've still taken the same journey, but the nuances of it, we have really gone through and changed as the course of doing. So those are my two snippets on the learning journeys around execution.
I love the word "just do it." That phrase
Yeah,
is
Yeah, totally.
really beautiful.
absolutely. No, I think I'll build up on what Ayushi just said. Is I think focus on the process and not the outcome. Every time I have got obsessed with the outcome, right, it has paralyzed me. क्या ये इतना बड़ा बिजनेस बन पाएगा क्या? अरे 1 साल में बन पाएगा क्या? 2 साल में बन पाएगा क्या? I think that kind of thoughts has always paralyzed. I think more technical, if I have to really add, is unit economics. I think I would always prioritize unit economics over everything else, because in case if the unit economics is not right in the business, then essentially you are paying the consumer to use your product instead of the consumer paying you. Right? So I would, like to fix that and prioritize that first, and get that out of the way, because that's basics. I think the second piece is the team, right? I think it's fine in the first 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, whenever there is a certain size and scale of the business, is that you are the operator. You are in the business. At some point in time, you have to get on the business, right? I think being in the business and being on the business are two different things, right? That's when you are really getting on the business and pulling the business forward. That's super critical for scalable business models. And since we are discussing scalable business model, I felt team plays an extremely, extremely important role for you to get on top of the business and not being in the business. And the last piece I would say is, I think entrepreneur founder has only one job, is to build systems. I think if you're building systems that you can run, I think you're in a way building a scale.
Yeah,
because there are certain businesses that don't require system, that requires you in the business. But when you're on the business, you need to build the system that you can run.
Great points, and thanks for sharing that, Vishal. I think while we discussed, the elements and the execution, there is one question I definitely want to ask you and get perspectives. Is the laughing Murphy law, right? What can go wrong in the business? I mean, what do entrepreneurs need to mentally wire them for as worst of the situations? While the fundraise is something which you didn't mention, but I think from a business standpoint, as one thinks of starting up, as one thinks of scaling up, based on your experiences and learnings, there are certain things which will be inevitable. There are things which will go wrong, and you have to either learn to live with it or let go of that point. So, I mean, talk us through some of the examples or experiences of where you have really uttered the word Murphy law somewhere in your journey of planning this. So maybe we can start with you, Vishal, and then move on
Yeah,
to
I
others.
have to say that.
Yeah, sure. I think, I think shit happens and it will continue to happen. And especially when you are dealing directly with consumers, it happens all the more. Whatever you do, I think it's going to be part of the business. It will not reach a point where things won't go wrong. And in fact, while you were asking that, there was an example that flashed my mind, and there was a panic call that came to our call center, and the panic call was from a woman who had, a girl who had bought fertility supplement from us, and they were having a difficulty to conceive, and they bought fertility supplement from us. And the panic call was, hey, I fought with my husband, and for some reason he got really angry and he ate all 120 tablets that were there in fertility supplement bottle. What do I need to do? Right? I mean, and we were dumbstruck. We never even thought about that use case that can happen. that a fertility supplement meant for our consumer, husband has it, all of it at once, right? I mean, we didn't know, will something go wrong? Ankur, you're on mute if you're trying to say something. Uh, but yeah, I think
No, I was saying, could never have imagined that this this is
now,
something which can go wrong in the business.
now the team is asking me, sir, what do we do? I said, I don't know. I really don't know. I never thought about it that somebody in anger would, lap up the entire bottle. But I think if I zoom out, now that incident, a month has passed. I think the only thing that we did at that moment, and thanks to my co-founder Rachna, she's very high on handling such situation. Left to me, I wouldn't have been able to handle that. I think the call out from Rachna was that we just need to speak to this consumer. She picked up the phone. She spoke to the consumer. She said, I understand your problem. Dr. Aarti Patil got on a call, and we guided her on what need to be done. I think nothing happened, thank God, but empathy is what was required at that point. Is that I'm with you. So yeah, I think incidents will happen, and it will come at a time when you really don't want it to happen. But I feel in all of those things that go wrong, I think empathy can play a big role.
No, and I think that also reflects then in the way the ethos of the organization is built, right? The customer centricity point, which we were discussing earlier, right? Anything can go wrong. The single focus was to really empathize with that consumer and solve for his or her problems, right? So, great. I think it's a very good example for any budding entrepreneur. Thanks for sharing that.
I have tons of
What's gone
examples
wrong?
as you guys come back and tell me, I still have memories. Um, yeah, I still have memories of the demonetization happening and how we could not run the business because a lot of the dealings would typically happen in a parallel on the procurement side in cash. So it's waiting for the banks to open on what will it take to withdraw some cash. And I remember that they gave us cash, which was in like 10 rupee notes.
Wow.
So we were busy counting those 50,000 rupees and saying, "Karenge kya?" But
Right.
anyway, I think that's just a funny example. So I could like remember when even Vishal and you guys like reflected on this, right? But I think going back to this point on Murphy's Law, right? There are two ways to look at it. One is for sure, right? Be fully prepared that what you plan for the day will never happen. There is going to be a daily fire, and it's about entrepreneur reconciling it, and it's not about world changing to make it happen for you, because world will happen like this only. So you have to be fully prepared that your everyday life that you need to that you live, right? Be prepared for it changing, things happening, and you will need some distraction or the other. The sooner you reconcile with yourself, better it is. It's taken me 4 years plus to reconcile with that, because I literally was going through my journey saying, जब ये achieve कर लेंगे तो मेरी life sort हो जाएगी, फिर ये achieve team आ जाएगी तो sort हो जाएगी, ये हो जाएगा, like but end of the day nothing changes, just that the gravity or the issue of the problem changes, but fire is going to happen daily or at least once a week, and be prepared for it. And the simple rule of law in terms of, for me to be able to therefore work through it, is that I enter my office, take 5 minutes to run my to-do list. There is a must-do thing and there is a good-to-do. Good-to-do can completely go off. Must-do is something I cannot not get away with, and be prepared for a situation like this. So that's the reality of this. I think the second thing on the resolution front, and because you have to reconcile the fact with the fact that this is always going to happen, is to have an ecosystem of genuine support and everyone understanding this. And for me, the way we've created that ecosystem is twofold. One is I'm actually fairly self-aware as an individual. So I very quickly train myself that, सिर्फ मेरे साथ नहीं हो रहा है, सबके साथ हो रहा है. So I can either, break through it, or I can crib about it and try and then spend the remaining few hours or days worrying about it. So that's one thing that I really tell myself, and I'm fairly aware of it. Second is genuinely building a group of team members and my leadership team. I have immense faith in this. They know my vulnerabilities and they equally understand what every one of us goes through. So we actually try to deal with all of this collectively and we back up for each other because this is going to happen. So that's something that we've created. And I personally also done that with investors and a set of people you have it in the ecosystem, because this is a journey. It is not going to be same. Everything will happen and you will go through tough times. And as I said at the start of the session, right, I actually feel that the last 4-5 years for any entrepreneur have been hardest in any shape and form, specifically COVID. So it's probably made us much more resilient.
Yeah, I think thanks for sharing that very candid perspective. Love that dog determination of getting through multiple instances where Murphy's Law played out, right? So thanks for that.
I just add, Ankur,
Yes.
just to the point that Ayushi was making, the last one specifically, that Muhammad Ali once said that all plans are a great plan till the time you get a punch in the face.
I'm going to use that somewhere for sure. No, that's great. No, I think so. That does bring us towards the end of the session. I think firstly, thanks for both of you to bringing out a very candid perspective, sharing your learnings, and I hope the session is very helpful to the budding entrepreneurs. I think for me personally, a key takeaways, if I have to sum up, right, and the themes which really stand out. A, let go of a control at an opportune time. Don't get involved in everything, right? Second, build your next layer. I mean, start vesting ownership. Third, there is no escape from doing it. Just do it, right? And that's the best way of learning and testing out your business models, whether they'll work, whether they don't work. Fourth, I think the most important one is to keep the customer and the core of what you built at every stage of your journey, from a 0 to a 5 to a 10, 50, whatever it is. That fundamentally, which gets built at early stage of your entrepreneur journey, stays with you forever. You stick to it. Everything which you do should be around it, right? And I think the fifth and the most important one I would also take away as a key message is there are concepts and there are frameworks to look at it, but every business has its own nuance. Keep prioritizing, keep integrating these elements, but it will not be one size fits all. Adjust yourself to the situation. So thanks a lot again, and I would like to also thank Your Stories, Brand of New India initiative, as well as the Fireside Ignite team to bring this together. And as we move along this journey of whose brand is it anyway sessions, what we also intend to do is pick specific elements of the business and go deep into understanding and learning from entrepreneurs like you to say how has been their experience, be it channels, be it supply chain, be it NPD, so on and so forth. And eventually, hopefully, these will be learnings which the budding entrepreneurs will imbibe as they start their journey. And feel free to reach out to us and watch this space for more. Thank you, Ayushi, and thanks, Vishal, for your time.
Thank you so much for having us. Good to see you, Vishal.
Pleasure, Ayushi. Same here.
Bye.
Thank you. Thanks. Bye.